All right, strap yourselves in because today we are going deep on a show you guys already know and love, Courage the Cowardly Dog. And you might think you know this show, but T, we are going to uncover some seriously dark stuff about its origins today.
I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, it's going to be good. We're using this article, pasted text, as our guide, and let me tell you, this thing goes places. Like, I was genuinely creeped out reading some of this stuff.
Yeah, it gets pretty intense.
Right. Like, who knew a cartoon about a pink dog could have so much, existential dread baked into it?
Well, that's the thing about Courage, right? On the surface, it's this wacky, kind of gross out kind of show.
Hmm.
But underneath all that, there's this layer of tragedy and kind of deep psychological stuff
Yeah.
that makes it, well, way more interesting than your average cartoon.
Totally. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Like, this idea that Courage's fear isn't just some random quirk, it's, deeply rooted in his past.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Because, a lot of people just assume he was always with Muriel and Eustace,
Yeah.
out there in the middle of nowhere.
Hey.
But he had a whole life before that.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't always living in that creepy farmhouse.
Nope. He was actually a totally normal, happy little puppy. He had loving parents, a real home. It wasn't, it wasn't all doom and gloom right from the start.
And this is, I think, what makes the whole thing even more messed up. Like, he knew what it was like to be safe and loved, and then, bam, it was all ripped away.
Yeah, the contrast is it's really powerful when you think about it
Yeah.
that way. It gives all his later fears so much more weight.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of messed up, let's talk about how he loses his
Oh,
parents.
boy. Yeah.
So the article mentions this car crash,
Right.
right? But it's kind of vague about the details,
Uh-huh. Very vague.
almost like it's hinting that it might not have been a regular accident.
Right. Like there are all these fan theories about it. Was it sabotage? Was there some kind of paranormal force at work even back then?
Yeah. It's super creepy. Like, it sets up this sense of unease right from the start, almost like the seeds of all the weird stuff that happens later were planted way back then.
Definitely. It adds this whole other layer to the story. Like, was Courage always destined for this kind of life?
Ooh, that's a good question. I hadn't even thought of it like that. But, I mean, even if it was a normal accident, can you imagine being like a tiny puppy and suddenly losing everything you know? Your home, your parents, everything.
The heartbreaking.
Seriously. No wonder he's so jumpy and paranoid all the time. It's like his whole world just shattered.
And that's where that deep fear of abandonment comes from.
Hmm.
The one that drives so much of his behavior later on. He's not just being needy. He's desperately trying to recreate that feeling of safety and love that he lost.
Totally. And that's where Muriel comes in, right?
Exactly. She's this incredible force of kindness and love in his life. She becomes like this anchor for him, this symbol of everything he lost and is trying to get back.
Yeah, she's like the perfect antidote to all the trauma he's been through. If only things were that simple, though, right?
Oh, right, of course.
Mhm.
Because we can't forget about
Ah, Eustace. Ugh, good old Eustace.
this creepy mask and that voice.
Yeah, that voice. Talk about a recipe for anxiety.
Seriously, it's like Courage is constantly caught between these two extremes.
Yeah.
Pure love and safety with Muriel, and then like constant threat and just general unpleasantness from Eustace.
That dynamic is so key to understanding courage. It's not just that he's as you put it, a scaredy cat. He's living in a constant state of hypervigilance. Like, his senses are always dialed up to 11.
Oh, definitely. It's like he's always expecting the next bad thing to happen. And let's be real, with Eustace around, there's usually something bad about to go down. Exactly. And then you add in all the weird stuff they encounter in nowhere, and it's like, poor Courage never gets a moment to relax.
Seriously. But speaking of names, Courage the Cowardly Dog. I mean, come on, that's got to be the most ironic name ever, right?
Right. Well, I think that's part of the brilliance of it, actually.
Yeah.
It highlights this constant internal struggle he has going on. He, I.S. cowardly. There's no denying
Sort
that.
of screams at his own shadow.
Exactly. But he's also incredibly brave when he needs to be, especially when it comes to protecting Muriel. It's
Yeah.
like his fear is actually what fuels his courage.
That's such a cool way to think about it. Like, he's so scared of everything, but he loves Muriel so much that he'll face down anything to keep her safe.
Exactly. And the article even suggests that this intense fear, it could be a form of what do they call it? Hypervigilance, brought on by the trauma of losing his parents.
Oh, right. Like, his system is just permanently stuck on high alert.
Yeah, exactly. He's always on edge, always expecting the worst, which, makes sense given everything he's been through.
Makes those reactions of his seem a lot less ridiculous when you think about it that way. It's not that he's just being silly. It's like he literally can't help it.
And then there's the whole other element of the show, the paranormal stuff.
Oh, right. The fact that he sees ghosts and monsters and all sorts of crazy things that Muriel and Eustace are completely oblivious to.
It's almost like he's tuned into this whole other layer of reality.
Yeah. Like losing his parents somehow opened up this sixth sense in him, this radar for all the weird stuff that's lurking beneath the surface.
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? And it raises all sorts of questions like, is this a gift or a curse? I mean, sure, it lets him protect Muriel from things she can't even see, but it also means he's constantly exposed to the things that would terrify even the bravest person.
Totally a double-edged sword. Poor Courage. Like, it's one thing after another with this dog. But, okay, so we've got this dog who is already traumatized by losing his family, and then he ends up living in this place that is, like, a magnet for the strange and dangerous. It's like, what are the odds?
Yeah, you got to wonder, was it just random chance that brought Muriel and Courage together?
Or is there something more going on?
Maybe. Maybe fate had a hand in it. Like, the universe somehow knew that Courage needed Muriel just as much as she needed him.
Whoa! I'm getting chills. Like, it's almost as if he was meant to be in nowhere, this place that forces him to confront all his fears head on.
It's an intriguing thought, isn't it?
Definitely makes you think. We're only just getting started, folks. Stick with us as we dive even deeper into the weird, wonderful, and sometimes totally messed up world of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Okay, so last time we were really starting to get into how Courage, even though he's like terrified of everything, he somehow ends up in all these situations that force him to be brave.
Yeah. It's like his life is this constant back and forth between like pure terror and like moments of crazy heroism.
Right, and we were starting to talk about how his past might be connected to that weird ability he has to sense danger.
Oh yeah, that whole thing about how he sees all those like ghosts and monsters that Muriel and Eustace are totally oblivious to.
Like as if losing his parents in such a traumatic way, it kind of opened up this other sense in him.
Yeah, like a radar for the paranormal or something.
It's really wild when you think about it.
It's like almost like his trauma made him like hyper aware of everything that's unsettling or unusual.
And like we were saying, it's definitely a double-edged sword, On the one hand, he's got this early warning system that lets him protect Muriel from all these threats she can't even see.
But on the other hand, it means he's constantly bombarded with these like terrifying images and experiences.
Like stuff that would make even the bravest person freak out.
Talk about a rough deal, right? Poor Courage. Like, can't the guy catch a break?
It's like he escaped one traumatic experience only to end up smack dab in the middle of another.
And I think that's part of what makes him so relatable, though, Like, who hasn't felt like life is just throwing one curveball after another?
Except in our case, the curveballs aren't usually, giant sentient puddings or talking bananas that want to take over the world.
Right. I mean, I've had some tough days at work, but I've never had to fight off a giant, what was it, a giant nose?
The perfume episode.
Yeah, with the giant nose. Okay, but even though the situations are totally bonkers, I think there's something deeply human about Courage's struggle,
Oh, absolutely.
Like that feeling of constantly being on edge, of always expecting the worst.
Yeah. And yet, even with all that anxiety, he still always steps up to protect Muriel.
He really does. And you got to admire that, Like he's shaking like a leaf, but he still faces those fears head on.
It kind of puts a new spin on that whole Courage the Cowardly Dog thing, doesn't it?
Right. Like he's not some fearless hero. He's a terrified little pup who chooses to be brave because his love for Muriel is stronger than his fear.
Yeah, he's driven by this incredible sense of loyalty and responsibility.
It's really kind of beautiful when you think about it.
It is.
And it makes you wonder if that's part of what drew him to Muriel in the first place, Like maybe he sensed that she needed protecting and that gave him a purpose or reason to try to overcome his own anxieties.
That's a really interesting thought.
Like maybe their bond goes deeper than just your average pet owner relationship,
Maybe they both fulfill some deeper need in each other.
Yeah. Muriel needs someone to protect her, and Courage needs someone to give him a sense of belonging, a place where he feels safe and loved.
It's almost like this cosmic connection, you know,
Two lost souls finding each other in the middle of nowhere, literally.
literally.
But you know what I really love about Courage the Cowardly Dog? It's that it manages to be like genuinely hilarious at the same time, you
Oh,
know?
totally. That's part of the genius of it.
Like it's got all this dark emotional stuff going on, but it's also full of slapstick humor and
Yeah.
and these crazy like absurdist situations.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really unique blend.
And I think that's why it works so well.
It's like it's saying that even when things are scary, even when you're dealing with trauma and fear, there's still room for laughter and joy.
It's about finding those moments of light in the middle of all the darkness.
That's a great way to put it.
And I think it speaks to why the show is still so popular, you know, even after all these years.
It reminds us that life is full of contradictions,
Right.
like
Like we can experience fear and joy at the same time.
sorrow and laughter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that it's okay to embrace all of it.
Exactly.
So we've talked about Courage's past, his connection to the paranormal and his relationship with Muriel, but I'm curious, what other mysteries are lurking beneath the surface of this seemingly simple cartoon?
Well, we touched on the idea that a lot of the creatures Courage encounters are kind of like manifestations of his own fears, right?
Right.
But we haven't really explored those recurring villains,
Mhm.
like cats or LaQuack.
Oh yeah. They definitely feel like they play a special role in Courage's journey.
They do.
Especially cats, you know. He's always like tricking Courage, gaining his trust just to betray it over and over again.
It's brutal.
It's almost like he represents the betrayal and loss that Courage experienced when he lost his parents.
That's a very sharp observation.
And then you've got LeQuack with his constant scheming and that need for control.
So he symbolizes that unpredictable and often cruel nature of the world.
Yeah, yeah, like the world that Courage was thrown into after becoming an orphan.
It's almost as if he's battling different aspects of his own trauma over and over again, you know?
Each villain embodying a specific fear or insecurity.
Exactly.
Wow, I never thought of the villains in that way, but it makes so much sense. And the fact that he consistently triumphs over them, even though he's so scared, it kind of suggests a deeper message about resilience, don't you think?
I think so.
And the power of love to help you overcome obstacles.
Yes, exactly. It's like Courage is constantly proving to himself that he can face his fears,
Yep.
that he can overcome adversity.
Even if it takes everything he's got.
And maybe that's the real journey, you know? Not about becoming fearless, but about learning to be courageous despite his fear.
That's deep, man.
And
Sure.
and maybe that's also the key to understanding his relationship with Muriel.
Oh, how so?
She provides that safe haven, that constant source of love and support
Right.
that allows him to keep fighting, to keep facing those inner demons and the outer ones too.
Yeah, it's like she's the anchor that keeps him from being swept away by all that fear and anxiety.
Exactly. And maybe that's the most profound lesson we can take away from Courage the Cowardly Dog, you know?
What's that?
It's not a story about conquering fear, but about the power of love, of loyalty, of that indomitable spirit that we all have inside us.
Man, I'm getting chills again.
We may not all face giant chickens or singing cats, but we all have our own fears to confront.
That's for sure.
And sometimes all we need is that one person, that Muriel in our lives, to give us the strength to keep going.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, you know, as we're wrapping up this deep dive on Courage the Cowardly Dog, I keep thinking about how you said his life is like this constant like cycle of fear and then triumph over it. Like every episode, it's the same thing. He's terrified, but he always pulls through.
Right. It's like this pattern almost. He gets thrown into these crazy situations, but he always finds a way to protect Muriel and come out on top, even if it's by the skin of his teeth, like you said.
Exactly. And I was thinking about how that kind of reflects this whole theme of confronting the past. Like all those creatures he encounters, those weird villains and monsters, they're not just random, are they?
It's like they're externalizing his own inner demons,
Mhm.
you know, those fears and anxieties that he's carrying around from losing his parents.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's almost as if the universe, or maybe nowhere itself, is forcing him to relive that trauma over and over again.
To face it head on, yeah. But Each time he does, he gets a little bit stronger, a little bit
Right.
more resilient.
Like, remember when we were talking about cats and how he's always betraying Courage's trust? It felt so connected to, the loss of his
And
parents.
LeQuack, with his need for control and all those schemes, it's like he represents the chaos and uncertainty that Courage felt after becoming an orphan.
It's like each villain is like a different piece of his trauma, forcing him to deal with those buried fears and anxieties.
Yeah, it's a pretty deep way to look at a kid's cartoon, but I think it's there.
And the fact that he always wins, even though he's so scared, it's like it's saying that you don't have to be fearless to be brave.
That you can still act, still fight for what matters, even when you're terrified.
And that's, I think, where Muriel comes in. It's not just that she's, the one he's always saving. It's deeper than that.
She's that source of strength for him.
Right.
That constant love and kindness that gives him the courage to keep going.
It's like their relationship is at the heart of everything. It's about finding that one person, that connection that makes you feel safe, even when everything else is crazy and scary.
And that's, I think, a message that resonates with everyone.
Yeah.
We all need that Muriel in our lives.
Totally. It's like even in a world full of, freaky monsters and giant noses, the most important thing is having someone you can count on.
Someone who believes in you, even when you don't believe in yourself.
And for Courage, that's Muriel. Man, I never realized how much depth there was to this show. It's not just a silly cartoon. It's a story about love, about loyalty, about overcoming your fears.
About the power of connection to heal even the deepest wounds. And yeah, maybe it's a reminder that we're all a little bit like Courage. We all have that potential for bravery inside us, even when we feel small and afraid.
Well, that was an amazing deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Hopefully you learned something new today, and maybe you'll even look at this classic cartoon a little differently now. And remember, sometimes the bravest hearts beat beneath the most cowardly exteriors. Thanks for listening, everyone. I do